Okay. So we're going to do, starting Gittin. It's funny to start with the last page of the Masechet, right? Which is after the Masechet goes through the laws of writing the get, and the laws of sending the get, and the laws of shlichut, all the technical details of what goes into a get. The last daf is a mixture of agadita and halacha, mostly still halacha. To what extent is halacha is part of what we're going to talk about. The prohibition, if there is such a prohibition, which rests upon a man to megaresh his wife. Okay, so the Mishnah says, actually let's start with the psukim. The psukim that talk about gerushin, right? Ki kach ish isha uva'ala. So that's kiddushin, right? V'haya im lo timsa chen beinav ki matza ba'ervat davar v'katav la sefer kritut v'natan biyadav v'shilcha mi beito. So we have a possibility of dissolving the marriage, right? In the contingency of, quote unquote, im lo timsa chen beinav ki matza ba'ervat davar. That's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. There's a possibility to megaresh v'katav la sefer kritut v'natan biyadav v'shilcha mi beito. The fact that we have a phenomena of gerushin, that there's such a category that exists, that it's possible to dissolve a marriage without killing your spouse, right? To dissolve a marriage through gerushin is not something that can be taken for granted, even if we didn't know about the Catholic Church, right? The Yerushalmi says that, according to one opinion in the Yerushalmi, that there's no gerushin for Bnei Noach. That's very interesting. Right? There's no gerushin for Bnei Noach.
Is there kiddushin?
There's ishut. There's ishut l'Bnei Noach. Remember the Rambam beginning of Chot Ishut, that before Matan Torah, the way Bnei Noach, that there's what you could call, there's no Ma'aseh Kinyan, right? There's de facto ishut. But there is ishut, and there is the Isra Eshet Ish for Bnei Noach. The name Noach HaMetzuyan Eshet Ish is part of Gilei Arayot for Bnei Noach. But nonetheless, there's one opinion. There's no way, except for, right, Lisa Sambal, as they say, right? There's no way to dissolve it. So it's not muvan me'elav that you should be able to dissolve a marriage through gerushin. The fact that we can doesn't mean that we relate to it with equanimity, and that's that it's okay. Even though it's counted as one of gerushin is counted as one of Taryag mitzvot, it generally means that it's a category. We'll see. There's some Rishonim who talk about like why we don't make a bracha when why a man doesn't make a bracha when his wife would get, even though he might want to, and she might want to also, right? But just because such a category exists, it doesn't mean that we look kindly upon it. Okay, and that's what we're going to talk about. Okay. All right. So let's see the Mishnah. This emerges already in the Mishnah, in the end of Masechet Gittin. Beit Shammai omrim lo yigaresh adam et ishto ela im kein matza ba dvar erva shneimar ki matza ba ervat davar. Beit Hillel omrim afilu hikdicha tavshilo shneimar ki matza ba ervat davar. Rabbi Akiva omer afilu matza acheret na'eh hemena shneimar v'haya im lo timsa chen beina. Yes, we have three. Let's start with trying to be an organized presentation of this. We have three opinions in the Tanaim. What constitutes justified grounds for divorce from the husband's perspective? Okay? So the first is Beit Shammai, Dvar Erva. Okay?
Would you even, in relation to your statement about, like, we look kindly upon the fact that the sentence is phrased in the negative, don't do it unless.
Right, yeah, but to see if there's some sort of isur. These are the conditions under which the quote-unquote prohibition. I'm being careful. I don't want to assume that it's a full-fledged isser. We'll see that also. Right, but whatever is wrong with it is permissible under certain conditions. Okay? So according to Beit Shammai, matzah ba'ervat davar is dvar erva. We'll talk about what that is. Okay? Beit Hillel says afilu hikdicha tavshilo, and Rabbi Akiva says filu matzah achat na'ahemen. Okay? What we have to understand is, first of all, what the severity of this quote-unquote prohibition is. Is it a prohibition at all? What its parameters are, and what its nature is. In other words, why should it be? What is the isser? Right? It's a great American way. Everything is mutter to prove an asser, right? So if you have something stam in activity, I don't assume that it's asser to do, unless I have some sort of reason to say that it's asser. Otherwise, it should be mutter. Okay? In terms of the chumrat ha'isur, take a look at actually the language of the Mishnah already. Right, the language is lo yigaresh adam et ishto. Lo yigaresh. Sounds like it's an isser. What?
That's what I just asked.
Yeah. I said. I agree with you. So I'm just going right. So it says lo yigaresh. The Rambam.
In the Psukim, we didn't see any feeling that.
No.
If you just read the Psukim, you would never for a moment think there's any type of.
Except it does give circumstances, right? It's not saying lo timtzah chen be'einav and then says v'katav la'sefer kritut. It says ki matzah be'ervat davar, and that's what the Gemara says. That each Tana is being befaresh. Is it erva? Is it davar? Lo matzah chen be'einav. So there is an implicit need that the Torah has to give a reason for what he's doing, which, so be really carefully. There is something, it has to be justified. Let's put it that way. So what constitutes a justification? But let's first talk about what the Isser would be. Why does anything have to be justified? Okay? So the first, you look in the Mishnah Lamelech that I gave, is a long Mishnah Lamelech. It discusses many aspects of this subject, sir. Actually, before the Mishnah Lamelech, so we saw I want to do the Rambam. Okay, the Rambam, the language that you find in the Rambam, in the Yad, one second, let me just find it. Here we are, on the second page. Okay. This is Perek Yud, Halacha Chaf Aleph. Okay, called Gerushin. Lo yisa Adam Isha v'dato legarsha. That's being unfaithful in the heart. Okay. V'lo tiyeh yoshevet tachtav mishamashto v'dato legarsha. V'lo, listen carefully, v'lo yigaresh Adam ishto rishona elam kein matzah be'ervat davar shne'emar ki matzah be'ervat davar. Now listen to this formulation. Lo yigaresh is the language of the Mishnah. But the Rambam's formulation here is ve'ein ra'ui lo l'maher l'shalech ishto rishona.
Why did he say rishona?
Oh, we'll talk about that because that's the end of the sugya. We'll talk about that. Okay? But the language here, ve'ein ra'ui lo, sounds like it's not exactly an isser. It's not nice. It's not ethical behavior, maybe, right? But it sounds like the ein ra'ui, if something is asur, the Rambam would say asur lo.
Can that be an addition? Even if you found ervat davar, still you shouldn't be maher? Like, meaning you can separate them into their separate statements?
Perhaps. Okay.
Like you heard there's something sketchy, you should
but
still...
it's not... Well, that has to... We have to see the sugya, okay? But I'm just talking about the language of how we formulate the hesitation that we put on the situation. We say that lo yigaresh, eino ra'ui legaresh. Okay, so now we'll take a look in the Mishnah Melech. So he has basically three possibilities, which he quotes here. The first is he says here, Matzati katuv larav knesset gdola.
Where are you?
In the Mishnah Melech, the top of the second page of the Mishnah Melech. Right? Mishnah Melech begins, there's a little bit of it on the first page, the top of the. Okay? So he says, Shekatav, right? The first one, the line is Reish Lamed Tet. Okay? Shekatav, the Ein Kan Shum Mitzvah, Lo Mi D'Oraita V'Lo Mi D'Rabanan. V'Da'afiu L'Beit Shammai, the army lo yigaresh, etc. Eitzat tova kamashmala. Okay, there's no real isser. It's the Rambam many times has this language of tzivu chachamim. I think Har'el.
Yes, I know.
Right, 20 years ago at least, you asked me about the tzivu chachamim, or I still remember that's interesting. The tzivu chachamim or amru chachamim, or language like that, and the Rambam is very equivocal. There's no isser. How many times does it say? Do you remember?
And that I don't
Yeah.
remember.
It says in the Yad, now I can do a search, right?
Right.
It says 36 times in the Yad that says Tzivu Chachamim or Amru Chachamim, or language like that. And the reason you asked me is one of the places is where it says women should learn Torah. It says Tzivu Chachamim, Sha'al Yilamed Adam et Bitot Torah, right? So it's not an isser, the way it always appears in some sort of moral, ethical context, where it's a strong recommendation, but it's not a formal isser. So what he's saying here is, he's not talking in the Rambam per se, but he says that the halacha of lo yigaresh ella, whichever opinion we're talking about, is not an isser, because frankly, where does it say that it's usser? Right? It doesn't say any place that it's usser.
If I didn't know anything and I read this sentence, I would have formulated, like, when I am Negaresh, I'm doing a mitzvah.
No, because the context is that there's no issue of being over a mitzvah. That's the context. As we see that, because it's eitzah. When it says da'afiu Beit Shammai da'omrim lo yigaresh, etc., even Beit Shammai, right? Eitzah tova kamashma. Okay. V'lo shehu muzhar al zeh. See that? D'lo matzinu b'shum makom shehem muzhar adam shelo yigaresh ishto afilu midrabanan. And what's his proof? Very interesting proof. V'rayal davar midhutzrach Rabbeinu Gershom or gola l'takein shelo l'garesh isha shelo mirtzona. It means before the takana, man could divorce his wife, we know, against her will. But if that was limited by some sort of isser, so then you wouldn't need Chaim Rabbeinu Gershom. Okay, it's not the strongest proof, which he says in the end. In the end, because he has other opinions, he says, and all those questions that I asked about Rabbeinu Gershom and these other things, he said it's easy to come up with answers. He thinks it's trivial. He doesn't even bother answering the question. All right, but in any case, it's interesting to bring in Chaim Rabbeinu Gershom in this context. And I'll say parenthetically, this is an important point. It's not exactly our topic, but we saw, just like when we saw the Chaim Rabbeinu Gershon on the Isser for a man to marry more than one woman, we saw in Chazal already a dissatisfaction with men marrying more than one woman, right? That it's too much financially, it's too much physically, it causes, it brings discord into the home. Those reasons are in Chazal already. Okay? But Chazal didn't go ahead and aser it. So in a sense, what Rabbeinu Gershon did, he took what you could say a halach ruach, right? He took
Spirit.
He took a spirit, right? Say somebody. If you talk about the spirit of the law, they'll accuse you of being a conservative Jew. But he took the spirit of the law that you find in Chazal, what they felt about a man marrying more than one woman, and he institutionalized it, right? And we saw the reasons. We saw the reasons for Chaim Rabbeinu Gershon not having more than one wife. The reasons given for the Cherem go back to the reasons the Gemara talks about why it's not ra'ui to have more than 4 wives, etc., etc. So it's in other words, Rabbeinu Gershon there is not yesh me'ayin. Okay? There is a background for it who comes before the cherem. So then, similarly, by him introducing Cherem ben Gershon here, you can also say, look, in Chazal already, we don't like the idea of that emerges from the din d'oraita that a man can be megarish his wife ba'al korcha, which seems to give the man this unlimited power, unchecked, beyond criticism. That why was he megarish? Because he wanted to be megarish. Because a man can be megarish ba'al korcha. No, that already in the Mishnah and implicit in the Psukim, right, is that even though a man can megarish his wife ba'al korcha, nonetheless, it's not ra'ui to do that. There's a certain hesitation. Comes along Rabbeinu Gershon and builds upon that hesitation that we don't like it, and then Rabbeinu Gershon comes along and says, you know what? I make a cherem, a man can't megarish his wife against her will. Right? So that's that. Okay? So it's sort of a continuation of the spirit that you find in Chazal, that we don't like undoing marriages without some sort of grounds. Okay? What that's about, we'll still have to see. And Cherem Rabbeinu Gershon is probably only about one of those. This Cherem Rabbeinu Gershon is probably only about one of those things. Okay, but we'll see. Yeah.
Against will and grounds are two totally different tchumim. You know, it's like you could say she committed adultery, but she still wants him to stay with her, or she. Right,
but they exist. They do exist along a continuum, because it shows that we don't want to give free rein to the man, that he can regard whenever he wants. So either maybe there's an Eitz Tova, or maybe there's more than Eitz Tova, which we'll see, and maybe there's even an Issa D'Oraita, which we'll see. Okay, so it does limit the person. So not to do it against the wife's will is one type of thing. Not to do it if there's nothing wrong. Not to do it if she didn't, if she was faithful to him. Right. So we have it does exist along the spectrum. So I think it is an extension of that idea, which is in a sense what he's saying here implicitly. Okay. So
Kiva is interesting because he says if you find someone better, so you might want to.
Hold on. We're going to analyze each opinion separately.
So
hold on. Okay. We're not to that yet. Okay. So the first opinion here is that the prohibition, there is no real prohibition. It's Eitzat Tova Kamashma. Then he goes on to say. It says v'davar teimahu. Okay, the first word on the line is midivreihem. Okay, it says v'davar teimahu lomar kain. Shav davar barur deika isur deoraita. The other extreme. Midagarsin b'shilim megaresh Rav Papa Amar Rav Papa Abaye lo matzah ba lo ervav lo davar mahu. Right. So what's the halacha? What would we have thought? We would have thought that there would be a mitzvat aseh that he should take her back, just like there's a mitzvat aseh of anusa. Right? There's an isur lo yuchal shachach kol yamav. It's asur for ones to be megarish his wife, right? The woman he was ones. Ve'im, if he's megaresh, so the gerushin are chal. It's not that the gerushin aren't chal. It's not like certain times kiddushin in erva is not chal. Right? With an Isur Gerushin, even if it's an Isur D'Oraita, beyond the doubt, it's an Isur Lotaseh, and there's Malkot on that Isur Lotaseh under certain circumstances. Right? Despite that, the Gerushin is Archal, but there's a Mitzvat Aseh that he has to remarry her. Okay? So the Havamina is, what if there aren't the proper grounds, and he's Megarish anyway? So he said, no, she's Megureshet. What's the Havamina? The Havamina is that he should, if he divorced his wife without proper grounds, that he should have to remarry her. So the maskana is no, he doesn't. Right? But the mere thought indicates that we're talking about an Issa D'Oraita. Okay? So that's what he says. Okay? Then he has another proof here, which is interesting. Right? Gam harashba b'tshuva. See, I skipped down a little bit. Okay? Gam harashba b'tshuva.
Say again,
The first word online is maran. Okay? Gam harashba b'tshuva simin yudchet katav delo teknu bracha al haget mishum diyesh miktzat gerushin shehein ba'avera. You have Gerushin, which are a mitzvah. Okay, when it's mutter, so it constitutes one of Tayyad mitzvot. So you could theoretically, he thinks under a mitzvah like that, you can make a bracha. Let's assume that, because we're not learning Hilchot Brachot, and I'm not going to talk about the mitzvah, about the bracha that you make when you go to the mikveh, or the bracha you make when you shochet an animal. There are certain times when the act is not exactly a mitzvah, but you still make a bracha. So he thinks that you make a bracha here as well. But why not? Because sometimes gerushin is ba'avera. Sometimes it's asur l'garesh. And if it's asur l'garesh, so then they weren't taking a bracha. In those circumstances, then you can't have sometimes you do make a bracha on gerushin, and sometimes you don't make a bracha on gerushin. So lo tiknu bracha. Okay?
What's the reason it's chal? If it doesn't? Just the tovat isha,
I don't know if it's l'tovata. It's not necessarily l'tovata isha to be megureshet.
well,
Right?
the guy.
It's not l'tovata isha
No,
always
but I'm saying
megureshet.
he's McGarish her, and then we say, oh, it didn't work. It's not like I imagine he's going to take care of her and she's this lost, she can't get married. Or
No. So if he
why-
doesn't take care of her, then she can sue him, and that's the whole thing of moreh.
So then why do we say it's chal?
What?
Like, why is it different than kedushin? Because if it would be a
Because
kedushin that doesn't
it's
work,
a-
it doesn't work. So why would does this work?
Sometimes kiddushin. Look, if it's erva, so that's one of the definitions of erva. The kiddushin not tosim. If the chibur, right? We talked about this a little bit in mamzerut.
Yeah.
If the chibur is not shayach, right? A father and a daughter, etc., right? But there are in chayve lavin kiddushin are chal. What?
Like
Grusha with a kohen, a mamzer with a bat Yisrael.
This is similar to
This, yeah. So the get is a good get, right? Look, if the kiddushin are chal, then you should have gerushin, right? The kiddushin are chal, we're talking about a couple that's married, right? So that means in the parsha, gitin v'kiddushin. So the get should be chal, right? So the only thought might be that there'd be a mitzvah say that he should marry her back, right? So that proves that there's an issa d'oraita. From the Rashba, the fact he says lo tiknu bracha, he wants to prove that there's an issa d'oraita. It doesn't show that. It could be an issa d'rabbanan, and that would be a reason enough why not to be mitaking a bracha, since bracha is d'rabbanan, right? And that's the third possibility actually that he comes up with. He says towards the end of that paragraph, Ivra de l'chora hayam makom lomar de lo asira el midrabanan. Okay, and he has a proof from Gemara in Sanhedrin. Okay, so we have three possibilities. I'm just laying out the playing field, so to speak. I'm not being mechanish anything. Okay, either the isser is not really an isser; it's an etzat tova kamashmalan. It's mashma that way from the language of the Rambam, at least in the end of that halacha, right? Lo ra'eno ra'ui, right? Lo ra'ui, or it's actually an isser doraita. And then you have to say, if it's an Issa Doraita, where does it come from? You have to say it's an Issa Doraita, which is it's not an Issa Lotase, right? But it's an Issa in Hilchot Gerushin, which is implicit in the pasuk. It says Lo Matzava Lo Matzachem Beinav the Ki Matzah Be'ervat Davar. So they read that as conditions, necessary conditions, midoraita, in order to make this process mutar. That's what you have to say. And of course, the middle possibility that it's not a doraita, but it's more than just a suggestion. It's an d'rabbanan. Okay?
that we learn from the Mishnah itself.
Yeah. And as the Mishnah itself says, and it's if you ask, where does it say that it's asur? So the answer is, it doesn't really say any place that it's asur, right? But Rabbanan didn't like gerushin. We'll see what they were thinking if it's a takana d'rabbanan. And so we're talking about Issa D'Rabbanan unless certain conditions are met. Okay? Okay. At the end of the Gemara, we want to talk about the parameters. When does this prohibition, Issa D'Rabbanan, Issa D'Oraisa, Issa Tova Kamashmalan, when does it apply? So interesting. At the end of the Gemara, the last word, almost the last words in the Masechet. So it says, quoting a pasuk from Malachi, Ki sanei shaleach. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im sneita shalach. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says, 4 lines to the end of the. I'm reading from the Gemara, but I gave it to you. It's in the Gemara in the first that I can send. Right? Yeah.
Sadi.
Sadi Amud Bet.
What were the words again that you just read?
Okay, well, I'll read it from here. So,
Okay.
yeah, okay. I just prefer the old-fashioned way. Okay? You got it's on the second page. Oh, no, actually, towards the bottom.
No, 1, 2, 3, 4 lines up then more.
Let's see. Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so we say, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Im Snaita, if you hate her, Shalach, then divorce her, right? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Sanui HaMishaleach. Right? God hates the Megaresh. So, it seems to be a machloket, right? Rabbi Yehuda says that if you hate her, be Megaresh. And Rabbi Yochanan says that Megaresh is despised by God. Okay? V'lo pligi. Ha bezivug rishon, ha bezivug sheni. Right? There's a distinction between a first marriage and a second marriage. Okay? In the first marriage, sanuya mishaleach. In the second marriage, im sneita shalach. Okay? Dam Rabbi Elazar, kol megaresh ishto rishona, afilu mizbech morid alav tmaot, shneemar, v'zot shenit asu ksutim a et mizbach Hashem b'chiva naka. Okay, so you have, what's the reason for this? V'amartam al ma, al ki Hashem hi'id beincha uvein eshet mi'urecha asher ata bagadeta ba, v'chi chaverta ve'eshet britecha. Dran alach ha'megaresh, yislik alach masechet gitin. Okay, so it's a brit, eshet, it's very interesting, right? V'chi chaverta ve'eshet britecha, the last words in the Gemara masechet gitin. But what the Gemara is making a distinction between zivug rishon and zivug sheni. Okay. What is that distinction based on? Right? And first of all,
your first one, the chance of you getting to a second one.
Then that's a different story. Okay. A person could be married a second time because his first wife died.
Yeah, but I'm saying it limits the amount of.
Okay, but we're not talking about how we got into this situation. We're talking about what the distinction would be based on. Okay, there's another. Just hold off with that. And there's another issue here, which actually comes up in the Mishnah Melech. In the very beginning of the Mishnah Melech, he quotes the Machloket Tanaim that we saw in the Mishnah, and then he says, the Katav, third line, okay, the Katav Mahar Shadam B'tshuva, Da'ad Kanol Pligi Beit Shammai B'Tilel Alei Rabbi Akiva, right? Rabbi Akiva is the one who's most mekil, right? Afilu lo matzah na'amena, right? But so Beit Shammai and Beit Hillel require more. But they only require more ela b'nisuah. If in the case of nisuin, aval ba'arusa kule al mamodu dafil matzah acheret na'ahimena. It's the difference between a nisuah and an arusa. The machloket tanaim in terms of requiring certain grounds for divorce, right? At least according to Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. Let's put Rabbi Akiva aside for now, right? That's only in the case of an isha nisuah, when the marriage was consummated, right? They're living together already. Right? But if there was only kiddushin and not nisuin, so then there's no issue. Okay. On this point, so one possibility is that there's no isur at all for an arusa. Okay. There are three possibilities here. Okay. The second possibility is. Right, Asher al kochach nir'eh, the top line. He has two ways of reading the Mashdam. Nir'eh lomar, de la Mashdam ba'arusa af im lo matzah acheret na'ahimena yachol ligarsha. Okay.
Where did you just read it?
The top line, right? This has to do with how we understand Rabbi Akiva. Okay. Rabbi Akiva, we'll see, there are two ways of understanding Rabbi Akiva. When he says, Afim lo matzah elan matzah na'ehemena, he found someone that he likes better. Right? Is that just a way of saying you do what you want? Or there still has to be some reason that he found somebody that he likes better. But even if he didn't find anybody he likes better, Then even Rabbi Akiva says that he can't get divorced, right? So he says that even if you interpret Rabbi Akiva, the more machmir version, we'll see the significance of that also. But with regards to an arusa, even that you don't need. In other words, the guy wakes up in the morning, decides he doesn't want to marry his arusa, so he can give her a get, and he doesn't have to give any reason. This whole Mishnah, this whole sugi does not apply to arusa. Okay?
Can a divorcee marry a covenant?
No.
So she still has all the negative.
She has the own right. She becomes a grusha. Okay, that's for sure. Okay. Then he says, Mikomakom, this is the third possibility, that there is no chiluk between a nesua and a arusa. Mikomakom divrei marashdam kashim heim be'enai lefi asvara ein lechalek. He says, I'm on the third line, the least towards the end. Lefi asvara ein lechalek bein arusa lenisua. Okay. And he proves, right, that the mashma the machloket is between bein ba'arusa, bein b'nesua. So we have three possibilities. Either you have Rabbi Akiva who said that we accept Rabbi Akiva by arusa, even though we're cholek on nesua. That's one way of putting it. And then, or we can say that even Rabbi Akiva is only by nesua, but by arusa you need no excuse. Totally up to him, right? But that's predicated upon a more machmir understanding of Rabbi Akiva himself. That Rabbi Akiva says that afilu lo matzah ela lo matzah ma'ahimena. That's still a positive reason which he requires. The rationale for that we'll see. Okay, but arusa doesn't even require that, right? Or we say there's no distinction between arusa and nesua. Okay, now why should this? Okay, so now we have two issues here. One, we have a distinction between arusa and nesua, maybe. And another is that we have a distinction between zivug rishon and zivug sheni. And what we're going to have to figure out in the end, of course, is how the distinction between zivug rishon and zivug sheni works back to the machloket that we have in the Mishnah. There's the machloket in the Mishnah about zivug rishon, there's a machloket in the Mishnah about zivug sheni. We'll see that that's a whole plunter that happens, okay? Yeah?
When it says zivug sheni, could it mean also someone who's married to two women at the same time? And it's the second wife, but the
wife who got married second.
Yeah.
Maybe. Could be. Okay. So let's talk about the distinction between zivug rishon and zivug sheni. There, it's already in the pasuk, and this brings us to what is this iser in quotation marks? What is it about? Okay. The language of the pasuk that they bring, right? Ki Hashem he'id bencha uven eshet nurecha asher ata bagadat ba. It's a betrayal. Okay? That for a man to divorce his first wife, right, the assumption is, as a model, that the first marriage is both sides were more naive and both sides were more trusting, right? So they enter into the relationship starry-eyed. It's very interesting that you can actually read that into this, given the fact that romantic love is an invention of Hollywood, but there must have been something there before. So Eshet...
pretty sure it was in Bereshit.
I don't know, romantic love, but in any case... but there's a sense of betrayal, that when a man divorces his wife, there's a betrayal. If we want to expand what that might mean, that it's a personal affront, that it's a personal injury that he imposes upon his wife by divorcing her. So then the prohibition is basically designed, if it's d'Rabbanan, right, is designed to protect the woman. Lacking Chen Rabbeinu Gershon, right? That Rabbeinu Gershon came in and formalized it. But lacking Chen Rabbeinu Gershon, that Chachamim, or maybe the Torah, or maybe it's an Eitz Tova, again, whichever one it is designed to protect the woman. Okay? And that I say from Begida. And that is the distinction between Zivug Rishon and Zivug Sheni. There's more of a Pgi'ah, there's more of an injury in a man divorcing his first wife then divorcing.
But she could be the first. That could be her first marriage, even if she's the second.
Okay, but they're talking about it from his perspective. That's true. You're right. It doesn't work out right. But it's Eshet Britecha.
You're talking about the Begidah to her, so it's how she feels.
Yes, right. But it's how she feels. But then they're looking at it. What would be if it's his zivug sheni? It's her first zivug. I don't know if that would be. That's an interesting question. I didn't see people talking about that.
Because you're framing
I understand, but I'm framing it the way the pasuk's framed. They are looking at it from her perspective. It's a begidah, right? So it's an injury that he's doing, right? And that would be the purpose of the Isser. If that's the case, right? So then let's talk about an arusa in this context. An arusa, there's less injury. She does become asura to a kohen. We're not talking about that type of injury, right? If they never lived together, right? He gave her kesef and he said, "Alright, mekudeshivli," and then the next day he was megaresh, or 3 months later he was megaresh. So maybe it's not nice, right? And nobody's happy about it. But b'chol it's not the type of injury that occurs if the people are married already.
But
right?
the ketubah, he has to pay her part of
Whether it's a ketubah by mina erusin is a whole separate machlok.
But when she is gerusha mina erusin, she is going to get meah. So she's not going to get. She's going to.
I said ketubah mina erusin is a separate
and
issue.
in her second marriage, when she gets married, when she gets married eventually, Nisua, then from her second husband, she'll get a reduced ketubah.
Yeah.
She's just screwed the whole way because then she'll be a shashniya, and then so I don't see how it's less of a begidah.
It's less of a begidah if you
Because
were
men
married.
care a lot about sex.
Because Eshet Britecha, right, is especially do a kabbalistic reading of the Brit, right? Eshet Britecha is you don't need a kabbalistic reading. I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but Eshet Britecha. Eshet Nu'urecha Asher Tabagata Ba V'hi Chavreta V'Eshet Britecha is a description of a Nisua, not an Arusa. Okay? So, in the case of Arusa, you don't have this sense of B'gida that you have by Nisua. And that would... Okay? If you say that the halacha only applies to Nisua and not to Arusa, there might be another reason for it, which is not connected to this issue of betrayal, or not even designed to protect the woman per se, but to protect the family. Because in an arusa, in the case of arusa, there's no family. Right? There's just him and her. Right? So if he wants to divorce her, he could divorce her. But in the case of Nisua, right, there'll be a family. So,
who's the family? The children?
The children, the institution, right, of mishpacha, right, is something that we want to protect. And that, of course, is only in the case of Nisua. Right? So it might very well be that the issue here is not then protecting her, right, so much as protecting the institution of the family. Okay? If you talk about protecting her, so here you get to something in the halacha which is important. If you look, just go to the Shulchan Aruch, the last page of the sources. If you look at the Shulchan Aruch, this is from Siman Kuf Yud Tet. Here, Lo yigaresh Adam Ishto Rishona, that's the Shulchan Aruch, yeah? Elam kein matzah be'ervat davar. Hagad, this Rama, aval belav hachi, amrinan kol megarish ishto rishona, mizbech morid alav d'maot. Okay? Now look what he says. V'dafka b'yimehem, shahayu megarshim bal korcha, aval im megarsha mida'ata, mutar. Right? If she agrees, the whole machloket, right? The whole Mishnah, and since the Mishnah misses a very important point, right? It doesn't tell us everything. We're assuming in all of this that she doesn't want the get. Right? And when she doesn't want the get, so Beit Shammai says, Megarish if she in Ervat Davar, etc., etc. But if she agrees to get the get, so then they both agree. So why not? Right? So let him be Megarish. You need no other reason. They just got up in the morning. They said we don't want to be married anymore. So the man can Megarish the woman. There's no problem. Okay. If we talk about protecting the woman, so it makes sense. So first of all, if you have Chem Rabbeinu Gershon, so then this whole halacha becomes moot, because she can anyway only be mitgareshet if she agrees. Okay, so you say if she agrees, she can be mitgareshet, and if she doesn't agree, that's when this machloket applies. So then it makes sense that the function of the isser, whatever the isser is, the function is to protect the woman. So, but if she agrees, so then there's nothing to protect. She agrees. Okay.
Why are we making a distinction if we're about protecting the woman between a first marriage and a second marriage?
I don't think the distinction between the first marriage and the second marriage. When I talk about protecting the woman, I mean for the woman's sake, and I'm looking at begida as an extreme formulation of that, right? So what we want to protect in the case of the first marriage is that there's a real betrayal here. So there's a real severe injury, psychological injury that he's inflicting. Right? There's begida. So then I'm sort of expanding on that and saying this may apply. This idea can apply in all cases if you talk about protecting the woman from injury. Right?
If you want, if you think it's protecting the woman, there shouldn't be a chiluk between whatever number of marriage.
The p'giah is deeper if it's the first marriage. The p'giah goes deeper. It's not that there's no p'giah, but there's not enough of a p'giah to say that we want to protect the...
We're not protecting the woman's socioeconomic status. We're protecting the woman's
her, like,
psychological health.
That's what it seems. The begida is Be'eshet Nura.
Forget the begida. If you just said we don't want divorces because we want to protect women, you wouldn't have thought that meant her emotional
You have to be clear with
divorce is a bad state, she needs to be taken care of. If she's divorced, she's not going to get money.
But that idea, my point is the idea of begida can be expanded to saying, yes, the woman in society is generally weaker. If she doesn't have a husband, she doesn't have financial security, she doesn't have protection, etc., etc. So that could be an expansion of this halacha.
But
right?
then you'd
so we'll see.
want to apply to the second wife as well.
Yes, and then it would be applied to the second wife. Well, there is an issue in the second wife. It may be less severe than in the first wife. Okay, but it's not that there's no prohibition in the second wife. Okay.
The Rambam said, hold on.
Okay. We'll talk about it. We'll get to the psak of the
Shniya,
Rambam.
imsana, imshachana.
Okay, so what is it? Right? But it's imsana.
Only imsana.
Right? Okay, we'll see. Hold on. Okay.
Is Rambam the first?
Yeah.
Where's the earliest appearance of the idea that if she accepts it, it changes? I know in the Meiri it came in different formulation.
The what?
The idea that if there's consent, then the laws preventing the gerushin don't apply. And the Meiri had it for part of the laws. Does it appear in Chazal at all?
Not that I know of. Certainly, if you say even if she consents, it's not sufficient. That we still need these grounds. Then you're saying it's not to protect her.
Right, and then it means there's a position where divorce is seen as something that's inherently bad.
Right.
Which wouldn't be a shocking
under
position if
those
that exists. Right.
Sometimes it's good. Right.
It seems
Sometimes that's the Mishnah talks about in Ketubot. Right. You have a woman who behaves in improper ways. They're mitzvah legarsha.
I mean, in the context, for example, of marrying someone with the intention of divorcing them, the Rambam doesn't say anything about if she knows, whereas in the Shulchan Aruch it appears that if she knows, it's okay. So there is. In that context, there is a difference of consent versus not consent.
I think that's implicit in the Rambam. I'm not sure if the Rambam disagrees with that point.
But I thought we said talking about Rabbeinu Gershon wasn't in Svarat, so he doesn't even have that conflict, does he? I mean, that's why it's the Rambam who's bringing it.
No, that she can agree. Right, she can agree.
They're talking
in the place where there's Chen Rabbeinu Gershon. First of all, Chen Rabbeinu Gershon was mitpashet. That was mitpashet every place. It's interesting.
Okay.
The Chen Rabbeinu Gershon about not having more than one wife, that was limited to Ashkenaz. It didn't spread everywhere, right? But the Lo L'Gaishi Shabbat Kocha, that did spread everywhere. Okay.
The element of marrying with the intent of divorcing, though, is independent on
Right.
the
That's that's independent. Okay. Okay. Let's understand one by one. Beit Shammai, Beit Hillel, and Rabbi Akiva. Okay? And this will also help us understand what the nature of the Isser is.
Those one-day marriages that the Chazal did, that was with the divorce at the end, right?
No, not necessarily. Man Havil Yom is not necessary to divorce right away.
So what's
Right.
the idea of the Yoma?
For when I come to this place, right, from
But
time
they
to
didn't
time.
divorce them?
Right. In other words, there the issue is that they had more than one wife, and it can, and if
But it
the,
wasn't
and if
that
and
you
you have
divorced.
multiple families and multiple courts, so then people don't know who their father,
No, I remember.
etc.
I just didn't.
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that phrase sounded like
Gershon, yeah, but that's not what we're talking about. Okay. Let's talk about Beit Shammai. Okay. Beit Shammai says, right, Lo yigaresh dam et ishto, ela im kein matzaba dvar erva. Quote unquote, dvar erva. What is dvar erva? So let's take a look at the Yerushalmi. Okay, Yerushalmi here, right? V'hatani Beit Shammai omrim. It's on the second page. Yerushalmi. Ein ela yotzei mishum erva bilvad. Hayotzei mishum erva is eshet ish shazinta. Right? So the Yerushalmi thinks that Beit Shammai says there's almost like a Catholic marriage then, right? The only time it's mutar legaresh is if eshet ish shazinta. That's very severe. That really limits people's maneuverability, right? You wouldn't really need a ksuba then, practically. Okay, so Beit Shammai said, if that's what Beit Shammai said, okay.
We talked about Beit Shammai, right?
We'll talk about that. Okay, uminayin hayotzeit v'rosha prarua tzadeh frumim zroter chalutzot. Right? How do we know that even if it's not as severe as infidelity, but other behaviors which are immodest?
Or it
Right.
means she's looking to get.
Or whichever, right? But it's not zinta mamash. We're not talking about nistara either, right? Not a sota, okay? Talmud lomar ki matzaba ervat davar. Right? It doesn't say erva. It's not dvar erva. It's ervat davar. Okay? So any type of behavior which is considered, again, you can formulate this in different ways, but it's considered an extension of dvar erva. We don't need. It's not that she's ne'aseret alav. When she's ne'aseret alav, zechiyuv doraita legaresh. But pretty close. Okay.
Those type of examples are in the other sources that are brought are implied that she's like looking to find that other outside partner.
Maybe.
In
I
many
understand.
of the places they are brought that way.
Right. Okay. I mean,
Is it possible the Bavli doesn't agree with that because it learns from Devar, it learned something else? So they would that in the Bavli they actually think Beit Shammai requires real Har'el?
maybe. I don't know what. It's hard to say. It's hard to argue from silence. Okay. But in any case, what emerges from Dat Beit Shammai is that it's only permissible legaresh when you're chayav legaresh. Okay? That's pretty severe.
Like the second
Right.
view brought is not their view.
What?
This Rosh Hashanah is not an explanation. It's not an alternative explanation of Beit Shammai. Or
It's an extension of Beit Shammai. Right, they're expanding what Beit Shammai, what's included in Dvar Erva. Okay? But it's still something, if you go back to the
It's
Mishnah,
it's
Mishnah
Beit-
Ketubot, it's where it's a mitzvah legaresh. Okay? So it's only, so it's basically it's asur legaresh. This is Beit Shammai's position. Asur legaresh, except when it's a mitzvah legaresh. There's no, there's no option given for shikul da'at. Right? Sometimes you enter into a situation where we give shikul da'at to the judge, we give shikul da'at to one of the parties, according to the shikul da'atcha, right? Here there's no room, the Torah does not give shikul da'at.
Ratzon, I think, would be better than shikul da'at.
No, decision making.
It's like
Whatever, fine. There's no room for his decision, right? You only can be megaresh when you're chayav legaresh, okay? According to that, right, you could say, if we asked before, what is this Isser? Is the Isser Doraita? Is this a Rabbanan? Is it an Isser Tova Kamash Malan? It could be that it's a machloket among the Tanaim already. That Beit Shammai who says, if this is how I interpret Beit Shammai, that you can only be Megaresh when you're Chayav Megaresh, so otherwise, an Issa D'Oraisa. In other words, in order to be Matir Gerushin, you need a Chiyuv Gerushin to be Matir Gerushin.
Why don't you just say the Eitzah is that you should only be Megaresh when...
It doesn't sound like it. So Eitzah, there could be all sorts of Eitzah when it's Kedai Megaresh. Now, we didn't necessarily Chayav Megaresh. Right? If I have such a rigorous connection between the Heter Legaresh and the Chiyuv Legaresh, that means if I need more to be Matir, it's reasonable to assume that the Isser that I'm being Matir is more severe. Right?
I don't know, unless you're saying you really should only divorce when it's a case where you have to. It's not a good thing, avoid it at all costs. Not you can't, it's something to avoid.
Okay, fine. I'm not saying, it's possible, but it's more reasonable to assume that Beit Shammai holds an Isser D'Oraita. Okay? Now, Beit Hillel, okay? It's Afilu Hikdicha Tav Shilo. What does that mean? Look at the Rambam in Perush HaMishnah on Hikdicha Tav Shilo. Okay? He says, it's on the beginning of the second page, right? Beit Shammai, see the Rambam Mishnah, the Mishnah. Beit Shammai nismachim b'milah erva. Beit Hillel b'amro davar. Each one, this emerges from the Gemara, right? V'divrei Rabbi Akiva duchuyim. And we don't accept Rabbi Akiva. Lefi she'im matzah na'eh mimena yisa'ena alea v'lo yigaresh et zo. It doesn't make sense. There's no reason to be Megaresh. If afil matzah na'eh mimena, so it doesn't to be Megaresh, just, I love you so much, dear, I brought another one home. Right? So you marry some, you can, there's no Chemra ben Gershon. Okay. Ba'od, okay, v'lo yigaresh et zo, ba'od shelo chat'a shum chet. You hear that? Ba'od shelo chat'a shum chet, v'hi mat'ima l'de'otav. They see life the same way. I wonder how much this is. Look, this is written in Arabic. Today's Mishnah is written in Arabic. I don't know, de'otav. De'ot in the Rambam is more than opinions. It's like, it's personality characteristics. Hilchot de'ot is like you shouldn't be koes, and you should be a rachman, and you should have humility. So I don't know if de'otav means that they fit in their personality, or they like both have the same vision about life. Okay? I'm not sure. Okay? There was this skit in Underdos a couple of years ago. Do you remember what I'm talking about? Anyway, there's one skit about like he's imagining this girl, right? And like they go and they machzir people b'tshuva because she works for the. Forget it. I'll send you all the links. Okay. Okay. I have to dig it up. Okay. Anyway, v'hi matima l'deotav. Okay. The Rambam's description here of Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai together, as opposed to Rabbi Akiva, is. Ba'od shelo chat'a shum chet. Why should he be megarish? So she didn't do anything wrong. Okay? That means it's clear that in Beit Shammai what she did wrong. Right? But in Beit Hillel, that she did some, what's the chet? Hikdicha tav shilo. Right? So it's mashma from the Rambam, right? That hikdicha tav shilo is not merely that she doesn't know how to cook. Okay, and so let's see Befeirush in the Tiferet Yisrael is in the on the Mishnah, right? Afilu hikdicha tav shilo, shesarfa tav shilo vehitkavna lahaknitato. She did it spitefully, because it's not just she doesn't know how to cook. She burnt the food once, right? She burns his food, right? I don't want to be in the kitchen. If you put me in the kitchen, I'm going to burn your food, right? So that's what Beit Hillel means, and then you could see that that's grounds for a divorce, right? If she does things against him spitefully, okay, so then mutar lo legarsha, okay. The Meiri though.
Why would you need to say a few with that though?
Well,
In the mid, they say.
It's afilu as opposed to Beit Shammai. You don't need ervat davar, even if she stam does things which are spiteful against him. It's not ervat davar, right? She doesn't spitefully, go to nightclubs without him, right?
It's a against him. Not the ultimate one of being adulterous, but even if she does
right. So it's not a dvar erva, but it's a davar, right? Okay. There's things going on, right? There's something going on, right? So it's some sort of piyabo lahaknitato, right? And she acts spitefully against him. In the Meiri, though, it's a little less than that. Okay. The Meiri says, Ubeit Hillel omrim. See the second line in the Meiri. Ubeit Hillel omrim, afilu higdicha tavshilo, ritzono lomar, sheina mishtadelet b'tzorchei beito lahoshivam al ofneihem. She doesn't take care of the house, right? Right, big trouble, right? In other words, in the traditional division of labor, right? He has certain responsibilities. You look in the Mishnayot, in Masechet Ketubot, what he has to do, what she has to do, right? So traditionally, her responsibilities are running the house, running the household. So she doesn't run the household, okay? Okay, she'ena mishtadelet b'tzorchei beito lahoshivam al ofneihem, v'anyan derech klal hu shemisarevet lo, ve'ena mitnaheget al pi ritzono. It's not exactly maknitato. She's not necessarily doing things spitefully. She does what she wants.
Aggressive.
Well, all right. That's also spiteful, right? That's right. I don't know if it's passive aggressive, or maybe she's not passive aggressive. Just lets him know. She doesn't do what he wants, right?
It's like the cab driver said to me yesterday. Her job was to serve the husband.
Right. Okay. So she doesn't. Right. So here it's not like mitato, but it's but she's not doing what she's supposed to be doing in the family. Okay? If we look at the Isser L'Garesh as something which was designed to protect the woman, okay, then it makes sense that if she acts spitefully against him, she has forfeited that protection. Okay? The Meiri, since he misses this, the spite is absent here. She just doesn't do what she's supposed to do, and she doesn't listen to him. It sounds like it's more of an issue of the family, right? That we don't like Gerushin because we want to protect the family, but this is a woman who's not doing a job in the family, right? So you could say now that she burned his food, she burns the kids' foods also. They get burnt toast for lunch in school, and they get all upset, right? Because Ima doesn't take care of them. Okay. Right. So the Meiri sounds like it's an issue more of protecting the family, whereas if you talk about maknitato, you need more of a counter injury, right? She has to be injurious to him in order to justify the gerushin, right? So maknitato, she does things spitefully against him. You can't ask somebody to live with ein adam nadgar nachash b'kfifa. You can't ask the man to live together with the woman if she does things spitefully against him.
It's not a nachash. In the Meiri, we're not talking about.
No. The Meiri certainly not. No, I was talking about maknitato, like she burns his food, right?
We don't know how he acts.
Right. What's missing in this whole? What's missing here? Okay, let me stress this from the beginning. See if anything catch me on. What's missing here? See, I've lulled you into this. What's missing? What's a big beat down? Okay. What's missing from here is what are the grounds for divorce that she can ask for kfiyat yet? Okay. So that's a whole separate discussion. Okay. But we're looking at now from the man's perspective when he's allowed to be when he can be megaresh. Okay. So that's in terms of Beit Hillel. Okay. Here, it's also reasonable to assume that according to Beit Hillel, that the prohibition legaresh is not the oraita. Okay? Again, Beit Shammai, you call them legaresh, mechayev legaresh. This is the oraita. In Beit Hillel, maybe it's Nissa D'Rabbanan normally, but there's no Nissa D'Rabbanan if she's not doing what she's supposed to be doing. Okay? If you say that you need haknata, right, that she actually is acting spitefully against him,